I bought my dream home in secret. A neighbor warned, strangers are inside. So I never thought I'd be the type of person to write something like this. Most of the time, when I scroll Reddit and see these long, creepy posts about my haunted house or unexplained things that happened to me, I roll my eyes and assume half of them are made up. But here I am, typing with the kind of adrenaline that makes your fingers shaky because something's happening in my life that I can't just laugh off anymore. To start from the beginning, I should explain how much this house meant to me. I've spent most of my adult life scraping by. Bad jobs, toxic coworkers, a family that loved drama more than love itself, and relationships that ended with me always being the one left behind. It felt like every time I tried to build something stable, someone or something knocked it out from under me. So when I finally got a decent promotion a few years ago, I made a choice. I'd live small, hustle harder, and save like my life depended on it. I didn't tell anyone what I was saving for. Not my family, not my coworkers, not even my closest friends. Because every time I've shared a goal in the past, it's like people worked overtime to either sabotage it or make me feel like I didn't deserve it. I wanted this to be mine. My secret, my safe space. Fast forward to a few months ago. After years of living cheap, skipping vacations, and doing side hustles that made me want to tear my hair out, I finally had enough. Enough for the down payment on a house. Not just any house, but my dream house. It wasn't flashy or modern or in some upscale neighborhood. No, this house was different. I found it through a small local real estate listing, almost like it was hidden. An old Victorian-style home tucked at the end of a quiet street. Faded pale blue siding, a wraparound porch, tall windows that looked like watchful eyes, and a roof with angles that gave it character. It had an overgrown garden, a squeaky iron gate, and trees that made it feel almost cut off from the rest of the world. The first time I stepped inside, I swear I felt something stir in me, like the house itself breathed. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, the floors groaned under my weight, and light filtered through stained glass windows in warm, broken colors. It wasn't perfect. Paint was peeling and it needed a lot of work, but that was part of the charm. It was mine. I didn't tell a soul I bought it, not even my family. When the papers were signed and the keys were dropped into my hand, I drove straight there alone, parked in the cracked driveway, and sat for a long time just staring at it. This was it, my sanctuary. The first night was magical. I carried in a mattress, some blankets, and a bottle of cheap wine and sat cross-legged on the living room floor, watching the shadows dance on the tall walls as the sun set. I didn't even set up the TV. For once, silence felt good. I fell asleep, listening to the creaks of the house, the kind of background noise old wood makes when it settles. But by the second night, that silence started to feel different. It wasn't the creaks themselves. It was the way they seemed deliberate, like footsteps echoing 2 beats behind mine, like a faint tap against the window when I was sure no branches reached that far. At one point, I woke up in the middle of the night with the distinct sensation of being watched. You ever get that prickling feeling at the back of your neck? That instinct that something's behind you even when logic says you're alone? That was me at 2 a.m., lying rigid on my mattress, staring at the ceiling, too scared to roll over. By morning, I laughed it off. New house, old wood, unfamiliar sounds. My brain was just making monsters out of shadows. But it kept happening. The flickering lights, the door to the back porch swinging open when I was sure I'd locked it. A faint dragging noise in the hallway that stopped whenever I turned to listen. Small things, easy to dismiss individually, but when they stack up, it's like a weight on your chest. Still, I told myself this was normal. Every old house has quirks. It wasn't until a week later that I met her. It was late afternoon, just after I got home from work. I was hauling groceries up the porch steps when I noticed her across the street. An older woman, maybe late 60s, standing by her fence with this fixed expression on her face. Not unfriendly, but uneasy. She waited until I looked at her before raising her hand in a small wave. "Evening," she called out. Her voice was soft, but carried across the street. I set the bags down and waved back. "Evening, you're the new one." "Guess so," I said with a smile. She hesitated, then shuffled closer, gripping the fence with pale knuckles. "Name's Evelyn Keller. I live just over there." "Alex," I said. "Nice to meet you." For a moment, she just studied the house behind me. Her lips pressed together and her eyes narrowed in that way people do when they're working up the nerve to say something. Finally, she leaned forward and lowered her voice, even though we were the only 2 people outside. "Be careful here," she said. The words landed heavier than I expected. I blinked. What do you mean?" She glanced up at the second-story windows of my house like she expected something or someone to be looking back at her. "I've seen strangers going in," she said, "when you're not home." I actually laughed, though it came out more nervous than amused. "Strangers? Like squatters?" She didn't laugh with me. She just shook her head slowly. "Just keep your doors locked and watch your windows at night." Then, as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb on me, she straightened up, gave me a tight smile, and shuffled back toward her yard. I stood there, frozen for a long time, the grocery bags cutting into my fingers. Strangers. That night, I sat in the living room with all the lights on, scrolling through my phone for security camera systems. I didn't sleep until 3 a.m., and even then I kept jolting awake at the smallest sound. When the cameras arrived, I installed them myself, one at the front door, one at the back porch, one in the hallway, and one pointing down into the basement, because for some reason that place made me the most uneasy. I synced them to my phone and left for work the next day feeling a little more at ease. But when I got home that evening and checked the footage, my stomach dropped because there were movements. Shadows crossing the hallway when no one should have been there. A door slowly swinging open in the basement when it was supposed to be closed. And worst of all, a figure, blurred and unrecognizable, standing in the living room for a few seconds before flickering out of view. Not a bug in the system, not a glitch. Someone had been inside my house. And I think they still are. The night I found that blurred figure on my security footage, I didn't sleep. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I pictured it, that unshaped form just standing there in my living room, in my space, staring at God knows what. The rational part of my brain tried to explain it away. A glitch, a trick of the light, maybe a bug crawling across the lens, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because the next morning, when I went into the kitchen, I noticed something that made my stomach flip. The fridge door was cracked open. I know for a fact I'd shut it the night before. I live alone. I'm careful. I don't just leave things open. And when I peeked inside, there was an apple missing. Just gone. I hadn't eaten it. I laughed nervously to myself, tried to rationalize. Maybe I'd eaten it while scrolling TikTok and forgot. But no, I'm not that careless. That apple had been the last one, and I'd specifically planned to eat it for lunch at work. So where the hell was it? That was the first missing object. Then it became other things. A fork gone from the drawer, my phone charger unplugged and coiled neatly in the middle of the floor. A picture frame I'd left upright in the living room lying face down on the carpet. None of these things scream ghost. None of them scream human intruder. But together, they screamed that something was very wrong. I got obsessed. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't focus on my friends texting me about dumb memes or family group chats about who was fighting who this week. Every ounce of my attention went to the house, to keeping track of what moved, what disappeared, what felt off. I started a log in a notebook. Date, time, what happened. October 12th, apple missing, fridge open. October 13th, fork missing, living room frame knocked over. October 14th, bedroom window unlocked. I always lock it. And so on. Each entry made me feel like I was building a case, even if I was the only detective. But then it escalated because one night I locked every single door, double-checked the windows, set the alarm system, and even put a chair under the doorknob to my bedroom like some paranoid college student. And when I woke up, the chair had been moved. Not knocked over, not nudged, moved. It was sitting 3 feet to the left of the door. That wasn't an accident. Someone had been in my room while I slept. I didn't want to be that neighbor, but I started asking questions around the block. Mrs. Keller, of course, gave me her cryptic warnings again. You shouldn't be alone there. That house isn't right. But other neighbors, mixed bag. The man next door, Mr. Green, acted polite enough. But when I asked him if he'd seen anyone around my house, he gave this awkward laugh and said, "Nope, not my business what goes on in there." Then he avoided eye contact and basically shuffled back inside mid-conversation. Another neighbor, a young couple named James and Lila, were more friendly. They said they hadn't seen anything, but admitted the house had a reputation in the neighborhood. "Kids say it's haunted," James chuckled, though he didn't look like he found it funny. No one would give me straight answers. It felt like everyone knew something but chose to keep their mouths shut, so I doubled down. I bought more cameras, motion detectors, even a small white noise recorder I found online that ghost hunters use to pick up weird sounds. My living room looked less like a cozy Victorian home and more like a paranoid bunker. And that's when I got the footage that broke me. It was a Tuesday night. I went to bed around midnight, exhausted but wired from scrolling through other creepy Reddit posts for validation. Around 3 a.m., one of the hallway cameras pinged movement. When I checked the footage the next morning, I swear my heart stopped. There was a figure walking slowly past my bedroom door. Not a shadow, not a glitch, a person-shaped form, except the face blurred like the camera couldn't focus on it, even though everything else was crystal clear, like the face itself was wrong. It paused outside my door for several seconds, head tilted, then continued down the hall. And here's the worst part. I never heard a thing. I should have woken up. I'm a light sleeper, but I didn't. They were inside my house while I slept, and I never knew. That morning, I tore through the house like a maniac. I checked every closet, every corner, every space under the bed. Nothing. I even dragged the flashlight into the basement, even though every instinct screamed not to. The basement was unfinished. Dirt floor, low beams, damp air that smelled like mildew and rust. I hated it down there. Always had. But now, I forced myself to check every inch. That's when I found it. At the far wall, behind a stack of old paint cans, there was a section that looked different. The wooden paneling didn't match the rest. When I pressed against it, it shifted slightly, like a door not fully latched. My breath caught in my throat. I pushed harder. The panel creaked open to reveal a narrow, dark passage leading into the wall itself. A hidden passage. My brain went haywire. Who builds hidden passages in a house unless they're hiding something? I crouched down, shined the flashlight inside. The beam illuminated rough stone walls, old wooden supports, and what looked like a tunnel stretching further than I could see. My skin broke out in goosebumps. And there, carved into the wall just inside the opening, were words. Jagged, scratched into the stone like someone had done it in desperation. Leave while you can. I slammed the panel shut so fast it echoed through the basement. My hands shook as I stumbled back up the stairs, heart hammering like a jackhammer in my chest. Because at that moment, I realized the truth. It wasn't just noises. It wasn't just paranoia. It wasn't just bad wiring or old wood. There were unseen guests in my house, and they didn't want me there. I've always believed that every house has a story. You can feel it sometimes when you walk into a place like the walls remember more than they should. But with my house, it wasn't just a story. It was a whole damn nightmare, written in whispers, scratches, and secrets buried under the floorboards. After finding that hidden passage in the basement with the words, "Leave while you can," carved into the wall, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't just go back to living normally, pretending that the weird noises were just old pipes or that my missing fork somehow slipped behind the counter. No, I needed answers. So I did what anyone my age would do. I opened my laptop and started digging. The house was old over 100 years, built in the early 1900s. At first, everything I found looked normal. Census records, property taxes, names of families who had lived here, but then the trail kept going cold. Multiple owners just vanished. One family in the 70s left in the middle of the night, leaving all their belongings behind. Clothes in the closets, dishes still in the sink. They never came back for anything, and their car was still parked in the garage. The house sat empty for years after that. Another owner in the 90s bought it, moved in, and 6 months later, disappeared. Mail piled up, newspapers on the porch, neighbors reported not seeing them again. Eventually, the bank repossessed the place. There were no neat explanations, no debts on record, no official missing persons filed. It was like these people just walked out of existence. And then I found a blog post from 2009 on some obscure paranormal site. Some guy had tried to investigate the house when it was vacant. He claimed the property was tied to cult activity in the 1960s gatherings, rituals, secret meetings in basements and tunnels. He said locals whispered about a group called The Circle that used the house as one of their gathering places. According to him, they were obsessed with transcendence beyond human flesh. It read like pure conspiracy theory garbage, but after what I'd seen, it didn't feel so far-fetched. I decided to push harder with Mrs. Keller. She always gave me half-truths and cryptic warnings, but now I needed more. So one evening, I walked over, knocked on her door, and practically begged, "Please, just tell me what you know about this house. I don't care how crazy it sounds." She looked at me for a long time, then sighed, like she'd been waiting years for someone to ask. "I've seen people," she said quietly. "Not just shadows, not just noises. People slipping into your house at night. I've called the police more than once, but by the time they arrive, the doors are locked, the windows shut, and there's no sign of anyone. They stop believing you after a while." My skin went cold. "You're saying people live in there?" Her eyes narrowed. "Not people like you and me." I asked her what that meant, but she wouldn't elaborate. Just shook her head and said, "If you're smart, you'll leave before they notice you too much." Too much. The phrase stuck in my head. At this point, I knew I was in over my head. My paranoia was sky high. Every creak of the floor made me jump. Every flicker of light in the corner of my eye sent adrenaline rushing through me. So, I called my best friend Ryan. Ryan's the kind of guy who thinks horror movies are funny, who loves to poke fun at me for being dramatic. But he's also the one person I trust more than anyone, so I asked if he'd come stay a few nights. He laughed when I explained. "Dude, you're basically living in the plot of a Netflix horror show. But sure, I'll crash there. You owe me pizza." Fine. Pizza was a cheap price for not losing my mind. Ryan showed up with a sleeping bag and his usual sarcastic grin. "So, where's Casper? Or do you have more of a The Ring situation going on?" I gave him the grand tour, told him about the noises, the missing stuff, the creepy footage, the basement tunnel. He rolled his eyes the whole way, but when night came, we both settled in the living room with beers, planning to stay awake and see if anything happened. Around 2 a.m., the house felt different. The air heavier, thicker somehow. Ryan was scrolling on his phone when he froze and looked up. "Dude, did you hear that?" I had. A faint whispering sound, like voices layered over each other, coming from the walls. We both sat there, dead silent, listening. The whispers grew louder, like dozens of conversations happening at once, muffled but distinct. I couldn't make out words, just the cadence of voices. Ryan's face went pale. "Okay, that's not pipes." For the first time, he wasn't laughing. The next day, we decided to search the house top to bottom. If there were voices in the walls, there had to be spaces we didn't know about. That's when Ryan noticed something weird about the massive old bookshelf in the study. When we pulled it slightly away from the wall, we saw faint outlines of a door behind it, sealed shut with wooden boards. It took us an hour with crowbars and hammers, but eventually we broke through. Behind it was another passage leading downward, narrow stairs choked with dust and cobwebs. "Bro, you're living in Scooby-Doo's worst episode," Ryan muttered, but his voice was shaking. We grabbed flashlights and went down. The stairs led to a branching tunnel system, much older than the basement one I'd found. The walls were stone, damp, and marked with strange symbols I didn't recognize. Circles, spirals, overlapping shapes carved deep into the rock, and scattered along the floor, belongings. Old clothes, moldy with age, a broken pair of glasses, a child's doll with its head missing, notebooks filled with rambling, frantic handwriting. And worst of all, Polaroid photos, dozens of them, scattered across the dirt floor. Some were too decayed to see, but others were clear enough. Strangers inside my house. People sleeping in beds, sitting at the kitchen table, standing in the hallway. None of them looked at the camera. It was like the photos had been taken without them knowing. My stomach dropped. Someone had been documenting the lives of people who lived here, watching them, keeping trophies. Ryan whispered, "This is messed up, man. This is seriously messed up." And that's when we heard it. Footsteps. Not ours, heavy, fast, echoing through the tunnels, coming straight toward us. Ryan's eyes went wide. "We need to go. Now." But the sound was getting closer. If you've been following along, you already know that my house isn't just a house. It's something else. A trap maybe. A stage for whatever has been happening here for decades. But nothing. Not the shadows, not the whispers, not even the Polaroids we found in the tunnels prepared me for what was coming. This was the part where I realized I wasn't alone here, and maybe I never had been. When Ryan and I heard those footsteps in the tunnels, we didn't wait around. We bolted, flashlights bouncing, lungs burning, dirt crunching under our sneakers. The sound of chasing feet echoed behind us, faster and faster, until it felt like whatever was down there was almost on top of us. Ryan shoved me forward as we scrambled up the stairs, slamming into the bookshelf we had moved. We toppled it back into place, our chests heaving, sweat dripping. Silence. For a moment, all I heard was my pulse in my ears. Then, a sound. A laugh. Faint, distant, but echoing from behind the wall. I don't care what anyone says. There's nothing more terrifying than laughter in a place where laughter shouldn't exist. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the cops. I told them everything. The tunnels, the belongings, the footsteps, the laughter. 2 officers came by, gave the place a quick once-over, and wrote it off as trespassers. People squat in places like this all the time. One of them said, jotting notes. They probably found a way in. Doesn't mean it's anything more than that. I asked them about the tunnels. They looked confused. When I showed them the bookshelf passage, their eyes narrowed. One officer ran his flashlight down into the dark. "This isn't on the property plans." But instead of being concerned, they just shrugged. "Old houses have weird architecture. We'll file a report. You might want to get better locks." That was it, better locks. Like a deadbolt was going to fix laughter in my goddamn walls. Ryan left the next day. He promised he'd be back, but he needed space. I could tell the tunnels shook him worse than he let on. That first night, alone again, I found the first note. It was on my kitchen counter, just a piece of yellowed paper written in jagged handwriting. "We live here too." My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't left it there. I checked every door and window, all locked. My cameras showed nothing. 2 days later, another note appeared. This one was pinned to the inside of my bedroom door. "You should not have come." I tore the paper down and sat on my bed shaking. Whoever was leaving these notes wasn't just breaking in. They were inside while I was home. Desperate for answers, I started talking more to the neighbors. Some were friendly, like Mrs. Keller, but they looked scared when I mentioned the house. One man, Harold Green, was different. He was overly calm about it all, smiling too much, dismissing everything as if it were kids playing games. But when I brought up the notes, I saw something in his eyes. Something flicker. Not fear, recognition. Later that night, I saw him standing outside my house at 1 a.m., looking at it. Not at me, just at the house. Then he walked away. The next morning, I noticed one of my security cameras had been turned, facing the wall. I didn't move it. Ryan didn't move it. But Harold had been outside. The noises came back. Whispers in the vents, footsteps in the attic. My food kept disappearing from the fridge. Little things at first: slices of bread, an apple, a can of soda. I set up motion detectors in the kitchen. The next morning, I woke up to see every single one of them triggered, but the footage showed nothing. The lights flashed, alarms went off, but the cameras recorded empty space. Either my equipment was failing, or whatever was in my house didn't show up on cameras the way it should. That was when Mrs. Keller came by again. She looked more frail than usual, clutching a rosary in her hands. "You need to leave," she whispered. "They don't want you here. Some of us are told to protect them. Others, we just try to survive." I grabbed her arm. "What do you mean, protect them?" She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "Not everyone here is on your side." Her words haunted me. I barely slept anymore. My nerves were shot, my hands trembling constantly. I kept replaying the notes, the laughter, Harold's blank smile. And then it happened. I woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of being watched. You know how your body just knows? I opened my eyes. And they were there. 3 figures, standing at the foot of my bed. Each wore a mask, cracked porcelain, like faces frozen in neutral expressions. One of them tilted their head, watching me breathe. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My chest locked up, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. And then the tallest one leaned forward. His voice was low, distorted, but I heard the words clear as day. "You should have listened." The room went black. When I opened my eyes that night and saw those 3 masked figures at the foot of my bed, I thought that was it, that I was done. That whatever this house had been building up to was finally going to happen. But then, as quickly as they appeared, they were gone. No doors opened. No windows closed. 1 second they were there, silent, tilting their heads in unison like broken marionettes. The next, the room was empty. I didn't even see them leave. It was like they'd blinked out of existence. I stayed frozen under the covers, too scared to even breathe, until the first light of dawn crept through my curtains. Only then did I get out of bed. my body stiff and trembling. The only evidence they'd been there was the smell of faint, acrid scent, like burned candles mixed with damp earth. That morning, I realized something. They weren't trying to hurt me. Not yet. They were testing me. Sleep became impossible after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined waking up to those masks again. So I threw myself into research. If the police wouldn't help, if Ryan couldn't stay, he texted me saying he needed a break from that house, then I'd have to figure this out myself. I started with the city archives, the oldest records I could find on the property. I spent hours in a dusty, fluorescent lit basement of the local historical society, flipping through brittle pages and microfilm. That's where I found it. A journal from 1973, written by a woman named Clara Winters, who had once lived in my house. The entries were unhinged, written in a mix of neat cursive and frantic scrawls. They come at night again. The circle calls them the merged. I thought they were people, but they are not. They whisper in the walls, they leave gifts, take pieces of us. They want to merge, whatever that means. The ritual is soon. I'm scared for the children. Another entry. I found the chamber, symbols everywhere, candles still burning, bones. They said it was the price. I will take kids and run tonight. The journal ended there. No follow-up, no we escaped. Just nothing. I felt sick reading it. It wasn't just trespassers. It wasn't just some weird cult decades ago. It was something older, deeper, and my house was still its stage. I took the journal to Mrs. Keller. When she saw Clara Winters' handwriting, her hand trembled. She lived there before the disappearances started. I hesitated. You've seen them, haven't you? Not just, shadows, the masked people. Her eyes filled with tears. I lost my son in the house. My stomach flipped. What? She nodded slowly. He was 15. He used to sneak in, dare his friends to go into the basement. One night he didn't come back. Police said he ran away, but I've seen him. Or something wearing his face. In your windows, in your hallways. I couldn't breathe. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Her voice cracked. Because no one believes me. They never do, but you're still alive. You still have a chance to leave, but I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until I knew what this house really was. Clara Winters' journal talked about the merge. Mrs. Keller's son disappeared in the house. My food was going missing. My cameras showed nothing but blurred figures. It hit me like ice water. The strangers weren't just squatters. They were the descendants of the cult that once used this house. Maybe even something more, something not entirely human anymore. They've been living down there in those tunnels, generation after generation, carrying on rituals no one else believed in. And I'd moved right into the middle of it. I called Ryan, told him everything. The journal, Mrs. Keller's confession, my theory. He was silent for a long time, then finally said, if you're going back down there, I'm coming with you. But this time we're not going blind. We made a plan. Recording equipment, flashlights, spare batteries, mask in case of mold or toxins. If the tunnels held the truth, we'd bring it back out with us. It was raining the night we went down. The sound of it drumming on the roof above somehow made the basement feel even darker. We moved the bookshelf aside, climbed down the stairs, our flashlights cutting thin beams through the damp air. The tunnels felt different this time. Colder. The symbols on the walls almost seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. We followed the path deeper than before, marking our route with chalk on the stone. The smell grew stronger, the further we went, like wet earth and something sweet, almost rotten. Finally, we found it. The chamber. It was a wide, circular room carved into the rock. Candles burned on every ledge, even though no one was there to light them. Symbols covered the walls and floor spirals. Eyes, hands. Bones were piled in the corners. Animal bones, I think. I hope. In the center of the room was a circle of black ash. Ryan whispered, "What the hell is this?" I held up the journal. Clara called it the chamber. This is where they did the rituals. We set up the recording equipment, our hands shaking. My camera's red light blinked, capturing everything. That's when Ryan noticed something in the pile of debris by the wall. A box. Inside were more Polaroids. We started flipping through them, old ones from the 70s, 80s, 90s families who had lived in the house, photographed without knowing. And then Ryan froze. "Alex, look at this." He held up a photo. My stomach dropped. It was my bedroom. My current bedroom, taken from the corner of the room. And in the photo, someone stood in that corner, a figure so dark you could barely see the outline. But it was there, watching me sleep. I dropped the photo like it burned. Ryan stared at me. "When was this taken?" I couldn't answer, because deep down, I already knew. It wasn't a photo from the past. It was now. I used to think buying my dream house was the end of the struggle. You work your ass off for years, save every dime, finally put your name on a deed. That's supposed to be victory, right? But here I was, standing in my own living room, knowing damn well that this house wasn't mine. Not really. It belonged to something else. The past few weeks had broken me down. Shadows weren't just shadows anymore. They whispered. Doors didn't just creak. They groaned like something alive was pushing against them. My cameras weren't malfunctioning. They were recording figures that blurred between flesh and mist. I'd seen too much to chalk it up to paranoia. And the scariest part? The house felt like it wanted me. After the discovery in the tunnels, the bones, the symbols, the Polaroid of my bedroom, I couldn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, I swore I felt someone breathing just a few inches away. Marcus stayed one more night before bailing, muttering, "Man, this isn't worth it. Sell the place, move, burn it for all I care." I couldn't blame him, but something inside me snapped. Maybe it was pride. maybe stubbornness, maybe the sick attachment you form when you've fought too hard for something. I wasn't ready to walk away. That's when Mrs. Keller came over again. She looked exhausted, older than ever, like the house itself had drained years out of her. She didn't waste time. "You need to choose," she said. "Either leave now and let them have it, or you fight. But if you fight, you risk binding yourself to this place forever." The way she said forever sent a chill down my spine. Mrs. Keller told me about a ritual, something buried in the journals of past owners, whispered about in town gossip. It wasn't exorcism, not exactly, more like staking a claim, declaring, "This house is mine, not yours." But it came with risk. If you messed it up, you wouldn't banish the strangers, you'd join them. Still, what choice did I have? The notes left in my house, the masked figures by my bed, the tunnels full of bones. If I didn't do something, they'd swallow me whole anyway. So I prepared. I bought candles, thick white ones that burned slow. I laid out lines of salt across every doorway. I found an old iron key. Mrs. Keller insisted iron was important and tied it to my wrist with twine. My camera was rolling the whole time. I wanted proof even if no one would ever see it. And then I went back into the tunnels. Alone. The tunnels felt different that night. Alive. The air was heavy, wet, like I was walking deeper into lungs instead of stone. My flashlight cut through the dark, jittery beams, landing on the carved symbols I'd seen before. Every step echoed, and with each echo came another sound layered beneath it. Footsteps. Not mine. "Show yourselves!" I shouted, voice cracking. "This is my house!" Something skittered across the stone ahead. I froze. Then, out of the corner of my eye, movement. 3, 4 figures stepping out of the dark. Some wore masks, others. Their faces looked melted, distorted, wrong, like someone had tried to sculpt a human face from wax and left it too close to their fire. My heart nearly gave out. These weren't just squatters. They weren't just ghosts. They were something in between. They circled me in silence, their heads tilting at impossible angles. One of them whispered, voice layered with static, "You should not have come." Another hissed, "We live here too." I gripped the iron key and started the chant Mrs. Keller had taught me. My voice shook, but I kept going. Words that felt heavy in my mouth, syllables that scraped my throat raw. The figures reacted instantly. They twitched, convulsed, their blurred faces rippling like water. One lunged, but I flung salt in its path, and it recoiled with a shriek so high-pitched my ears rang. I moved toward the chamber. The one with the bones, the candles, the altar. That was the heart of it. If the ritual meant anything, it had to be done there. The closer I got, the more they fought me. Shadows slammed against the walls, whispers turned into screams, and cold hands brushed against my skin even when no one was near. But I kept chanting, kept walking, until I stood at the center of the chamber. I planted the key into a crack in the stone, poured the last of the salt in a circle around me, and raised my voice until I was screaming the words. The chamber erupted. The strangers convulsed, some collapsing into heaps of cloth and bone, others evaporating into smoke that screamed as it disappeared. The walls shuddered, like the whole house was breathing through the tunnels, but not all of them vanished. One remained. A figure taller than the rest, its mask carved with the same symbols from the altar. Its voice was everywhere, inside my skull. "You are one of us now." I screamed back, "No! This is my house," and slammed the iron key into the altar. The stone cracked. A blast of wind shot through the chamber, extinguishing every candle. The figure wailed, a sound that didn't belong in this world, and dissolved into ash. And then, silence. I woke up hours later on the basement floor, the taste of blood in my mouth, my ears ringing. The house was quiet. No shadows darting, no whispers in the walls, no notes left on the kitchen table. For the first time, it felt mine. Marcus never came back. I couldn't blame him. Mrs. Keller stopped visiting, too, just a nod across the street. Eyes full of pity. She knew what it cost me. The months passed. I fixed the broken windows, painted the walls, even managed to sleep through the night again. The house felt normal. I convinced myself I'd won. Until last week. I came home one evening to find something on my doorstep. A Polaroid photo. Hands shaking, I picked it up. It was my bedroom. My bed. And me, fast asleep. But in the corner of the room, half hidden in the shadows, stood a figure, watching. The back of my neck went cold, and in that moment I realized the truth. You don't win against this house. At best, you survive. And if I'm being honest, I don't think I'm surviving much longer. I think this the and or not. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.